Captain Jack Reynolds stood on the bridge of the ESS Prometheus, his eyes fixed on the holographic display showing the approaching Haelor vessels. Their crystalline ships glittered like stars against the void, beautiful and deadly in their precision. He took a slow sip from his steel coffee mug, the last real coffee from Earth's supply. "They're moving into attack formation, sir," Lieutenant Emma Foster reported from her station, her fingers dancing across the tactical interface. "Standard Haelor protocol. 5 points of a perfect pentagon." Reynolds nodded, setting down his mug on the console. "How long until they're in range?" 3 minutes, sir. Their energy signatures are unlike anything in our database." The bridge crew maintained their composure, each member focused on their tasks with the kind of calm that came from years of training, and the peculiar human ability to treat extraordinary situations as just another day at the office. Chief Engineer Tom Martinez's voice crackled over the comm, his usual humor evident even in this tense moment. "Captain, I've got some good news, and some interesting news. The good news is I've managed to boost our shield capacity by 15%. The interesting news is that I had to use parts from the backup coffee maker." Reynolds allowed himself a small smile. "As long as the primary coffee maker is intact, Chief, we can't fight an alien empire without proper caffeine." The moment of levity was interrupted by a burst of light across their main view screen. The Haelor ships had activated their communication arrays, the crystal formations on their hulls pulsing with an almost hypnotic rhythm. "Incoming transmission," Communications Officer Sarah Rodriguez announced. Well, sir, it's unlike any first contact protocol I've seen." The message that appeared was brief and direct. "Inferior vessel, you have entered sovereign space of the eternal Haelor Empire. Immediate surrender is required. Resistance will result in immediate destruction. You have 1 standard time unit to comply." Reynolds straightened his uniform, more out of habit than necessity. "Open a channel, Rodriguez. Let's show them how we do things on Earth." The bridge crew exchanged knowing glances as Reynolds cleared his throat. Their captain's reputation for unorthodox diplomacy was well known throughout the Earth Space Service. "Haelor vessels, this is Captain Jack Reynolds of the Earth ship Prometheus. I notice you've got an impressive formation there. Would you be interested in discussing it over a cup of coffee? We make it the old-fashioned way. No replication." The silence that followed was almost tangible. The Haelor ships maintained their position, their crystal formations flickering in what almost seemed like confusion. "Sir," Foster interjected, "their weapons are charging. All 5 ships." "Well," Reynolds said, picking up his coffee mug again, "I suppose they're not coffee people. Battle stations, everyone. Let's show them why you never corner a human ship." The Prometheus's alert system activated, bathing the bridge in a red glow. Crew members moved with practiced efficiency, each person knowing their role in what was about to become either a glorious chapter in human history or a very short footnote. Martinez's voice came through again. "Shields at maximum, Captain. I've rerouted power from the non-essential systems, except the coffee maker, of course. That's essential." The Haelor ships began to move, their formation tightening into what intelligence reports had dubbed the Spear of Dawn, a battle configuration that had reportedly never failed in over 3 centuries of Haelor military history. "They're launching their first warning shot," Foster announced, her hand steady on the controls. "Impact in 5 seconds." Reynolds took one last sip of his coffee, placed the mug in its specially designed holder, and smiled. "Well, ladies and gentlemen, it looks like we're about to give the Haelor Empire their first history lesson about humans. Evasive pattern Delta 7. Let's show them why Earth ships have inertial dampeners rated for forces that would turn other species to paste." The Prometheus's engines hummed to life as the first Haelor energy blast approached, and in that moment, the crew of Earth's most advanced ship prepared to teach an empire why underestimating humans was about to become their last mistake. Would you like me to continue with Part 2, or would you like any adjustments to Part 1? The Haelor energy blast streaked through space like lightning, its purple-white beam, and with perfect precision at the Prometheus's bridge. By all mathematical models in the Empire's vast database, the human ship should have been exactly where their targeting systems predicted. It wasn't. The Prometheus pivoted on its axis in a way that made the Haelor tactical officers question their sensor readings. The ship didn't just dodge. It rolled, twisted, and somehow managed to reorient itself behind one of the Haelor support vessels. 15 Gs, and holding steady, Lieutenant Foster called out, her voice showing no strain despite the maneuver that should have rendered the crew unconscious. The Haelors are attempting to recalculate their formation. In the ship's medical bay, Dr. Mike Anderson continued his delicate surgery on Engineer Lewis's broken arm, his hand steadied despite the high G maneuvers. "Just another day at the office," he muttered, as the bone-knitting device hummed softly. Though I must say, the captain's evasive patterns add a certain excitement to routine procedures. Back on the bridge, Reynolds watched as the Haelor ships struggled to adapt their perfect formation to account for the Prometheus's impossible movements. Their crystal ships blazed with energy as they attempted to reposition. "Sir," Rodriguez called from communications, "we're picking up some interesting chatter. Their tactical AI is, well, sir, it appears to be having a breakdown trying to predict our movement patterns." Reynolds grinned. "Well, that's what happens when you try to apply pure logic to human behavior. Martinez, how are our systems holding up?" "The good news is the coffee maker is still working," Martins replied through the comm. "The better news is I found a way to route power through it to boost our rear shields. Don't ask me how. It just worked." The Haelor ships had regrouped, their formation now changed into what intelligence called the Crystal Spear, a pattern used only against the most dangerous opponents. Their next attack came from 3 directions at once, a combination that had shattered the defenses of countless civilizations. "Incoming fire," Foster announced. "They're using their primary weapons." Reynolds leaned forward in his chair. "Execute maneuver pattern coffee break." The bridge crew suppressed their smiles at the name. A maneuver that had been created during a late-night strategy session, fueled by too much caffeine and not enough sleep. The Prometheus suddenly cut all external power signatures, appearing dead in space, for precisely 2.3 seconds before its engines roared back to life at 200% capacity. The ship shot through the gaps in the Haelor formation like a bullet through paper, its wake disrupting the careful alignment of their crystal ships. Alarms blared on the Haelor vessels as their carefully calculated energy patterns collapsed, their shots passing through empty space or, worse, coming dangerously close to their own ships. "Sir," Foster reported with a hint of pride, "their formation is breaking down. Their ships are having to move independently to avoid hitting each other." "Send them another message," Reynolds ordered. "Same as before. Coffee invitation still stands." The response came swiftly, but this time there was a note of confusion in the mechanical translation. "Human vessel, your movement patterns defy known physical laws. Explain your methods of navigation." Reynolds chuckled. "Tell them it's simple. We just don't know what's impossible until after we've done it." As if to emphasize his point, the Prometheus executed another series of maneuvers that had several Haelor officers checking their sensor equipment for malfunctions. The human ship moved like a living thing, its responses more akin to animal instinct than machine precision. "Captain," Martins called, his voice mixing with the hum of overworked engines, "whatever you're planning next, make it quick. I've got the coffee maker running at 250% capacity, and I don't think the cups were designed for this kind of power output." Reynolds watched as the Haelor ships began a new formation, their crystalline hulls glowing with building energy. "Well, ladies and gentlemen," he announced to his crew, It looks like the Empire is about to learn why humans put cup holders in everything. Prepare for emergency maneuver Delta 5. Let's show them what happens when you corner a species that evolved chasing its prey to exhaustion. The space around the Prometheus lit up with energy as the battle entered its next phase, and the Haelor Empire was about to learn another lesson about human ingenuity. Would you like me to continue with Part 3, or would you like any adjustments to Part 2? Lieutenant Foster's console erupted with warnings as the Haelor ships unleashed their next attack. Crystal-focused energy beams lanced through space, creating a web of deadly light around the Prometheus. According to every known combat doctrine, the human ship was finally trapped. "They'd got us boxed in," Foster reported, her eyes scanning the tactical display. "Conventional evasive maneuvers won't work this time." Reynolds took a long look at the pattern of enemy ships, then tapped his console. "Martins, remember that crazy idea you had about the maintenance drones last week? The one you said would violate at least 15 safety protocols." Martinez's voice held a note of excitement. "I've been tinkering with it during my coffee breaks. Consider those protocols temporarily suspended. Launch all maintenance drones." The Haelor fleet watched in confusion as dozens of small, seemingly harmless maintenance units poured from the Prometheus's service bays. Each drone had been modified with parts from various ship systems, creating what Martinez had dubbed the swarm. "Drones deployed," Martinez announced. "You should see what happens when you combine standard repair lasers with parts from the backup coffee filtration system." The drones moved in perfect synchronization, their modified repair beams creating a dispersal field that split the Haelor energy weapons into harmless light shows. Behind enemy lines, the Haelor command was facing an unprecedented situation. "Sir," Rodriguez called out, "we're intercepting their communications. Their tactical officers are demanding an explanation for how maintenance equipment is negating their advanced weaponry." Reynolds smiled. "Send them a message. Sometimes the best defense is a good cup of coffee and some creative engineering." Meanwhile, in engineering, Lieutenant Emma Foster had commandeered the ship's primary coffee maker. Her hands moved with surgical precision as she rerouted power conduits through the machine's heating element. "Captain," she called over the comm, "you know how the Haelors use crystal focusing arrays for their weapons. Well, it turns out the molecular structure of coffee grounds has some interesting properties when exposed to high-energy particles." The bridge crew watched in amazement as a new shield pattern formed around the ship, the energy signature unlike anything in known space. The Haelor's next volley of attacks dissipated harmlessly against the coffee ground-enhanced barrier. "Their ships are recalibrating," Foster reported. "They've never seen shield technology like this." Martinez's voice crackled through the comm again. "That's because no one's ever been desperate enough to weaponize a coffee maker before. Speaking of which, Captain, we might want to stock up on premium roast after this. It seems to generate the strongest field." The Haelor fleet's perfect formation had devolved into chaos. Their attempts to adapt to the human ship's impossible defenses led to conflicting orders and confused maneuvers. The Empire's military database was frantically creating a new category just to classify the events they were witnessing. Reynolds stood from his chair, watching as his crew's innovations turned the tide of battle. "Rodriguez, are you still recording everything for the Academy?" "Yes, sir. Though I don't think anyone will believe the part about the coffee maker. Trust me, Lieutenant, this is going to revolutionize ship design. I can see it now. Essential equipment, weapons, shields, and premium coffee grounds." The maintenance drones continued their dance through space, their improvised defense screen growing stronger as Foster fine-tuned the coffee-enhanced shield harmonics. The Haelor ship's crystal arrays began to show signs of stress, their perfect formations unable to maintain coherence against the chaotic human defense strategy. "Sir," Foster called out, "they're pulling back. Their energy signatures are fluctuating." Reynolds nodded, understanding the significance. They're not retreating. They're calling for reinforcements. It seems we've graduated from annoying interference to serious threat. As if to confirm his words, new signals appeared on the long-range scanners. The Haelor Empire was deploying their elite Sunbreaker fleet, a force reserved for only the most significant threats to their dominion. Martinez's voice held a mix of concern and excitement. I hope the elite fleet likes coffee, Captain, because we're about to serve them a very special blend. The battle was far from over, but the Haelor Empire had already learned a crucial lesson. Never underestimate a human ship, especially one equipped with coffee and engineers who think outside the box. Would you like me to continue with Part 4, or would you like any adjustments to Part 3? The elite Sunbreaker fleet emerged from hyperspace in a display of power that would have cowed most species into immediate surrender. 7 crystal ships, each the size of a small moon, their hulls etched with the battle records of 1,000 victories. At their center, the command vessel Eternal Victory carried Admiral Vexthor, undefeated in 3 centuries of warfare. Well, Reynolds said, taking a fresh sip of coffee, looks like we got their attention. Lieutenant Foster's hands flew over her console. Sir, the energy output from just one of those ships could power Earth's central colony for a year. Rodriguez, Reynolds called, patch me through to the main computer. It's time for a history lesson. The young communications officer nodded, understanding the captain's plan. Within moments, the Prometheus's database was connected to the ship's broadcasting system. To the approaching Haelor fleet, Reynolds's voice carried across the void. Before you continue this engagement, I believe there's something you should know about humans. The ship's computer began transmitting historical records. Images of ancient battles flowed through space. 300 Spartans at Thermopylae, the Alamo's last stand, the charge of the Light Brigade. Each scene showed humans fighting against impossible odds, refusing to submit even in the face of certain defeat. Admiral Vexthor's response came swiftly. Your historical defeats do not impress us, human. Those weren't defeats, Admiral, Reynolds replied calmly. They were lessons. Lessons that taught us how to face the impossible. Martinez, show them what we learned. The chief engineer's voice was steady. Activating emergency protocol last stand. Sir, diverting all power from non-essential systems, except the coffee maker, of course. The Prometheus's hull began to glow with an inner light as power coursed through circuits never meant to handle such energy. The coffee-enhanced shields shimmered with new strength, their pattern shifting in ways that made the Haelor sensors flash with warning signals. Sir, Rodriguez called out, we're picking up increased communications between the Haelor ships. Their junior officers are questioning the attack strategy. Reynolds smiled. The plan was working. Send them the next package. Show them what happens when humans are backed into a corner. The transmission continued, but now it showed different scenes. The Wright brothers defying gravity, the first moon landing, the Mars colony surviving its first dust storm. Humanity's greatest moments of triumph against nature itself. Their flagship is responding, Rodriguez announced, a note of surprise in her voice. They're asking questions about the images. Sir, Foster added, 3 of their support ships have shifted formation. They're moving to defensive positions. That's against their standard protocol. The bridge crew watched as the mighty Sunbreaker fleet, pride of the Haelor Empire, began to show the first signs of uncertainty in its history. The younger officers, raised on stories of perfect victory through perfect obedience, were witnessing something their training had never prepared them for. Humans who simply refused to accept defeat. Captain, Martins called from engineering. You should know that the coffee maker is now operating at 300% capacity. We're making the best cup of coffee in human history, even if it might tear a hole in space-time. Reynolds stood, straightening his uniform. Send one final message to Admiral Vexthor. In all your centuries of victory, have you ever faced an enemy who turned their breakfast beverages into weapons? Perhaps it's time for both our species to learn something new. The silence that followed was deafening. The massive Haelor ships hung in space, their crystal arrays pulsing with untapped power, while the single human vessel faced them down with nothing but improvised technology and sheer determination. "Sir," Foster reported, her voice tight with excitement, "the Admiral's ship. It's powering down its main weapons array." Reynolds nodded, understanding the significance. It seems the Empire is about to have its first lesson in diplomacy. Rodriguez, prepare a fresh pot of coffee. I believe we're about to have guests. The battle had reached a turning point, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through something the Haelor Empire had never encountered before: the human ability to turn impossible situations into improbable victories. Would you like me to continue with Part 5, or would you like any adjustments to Part 4? The engineering bay of the Prometheus looked like a cross between a workshop and a caffeine-fueled dream. Chief Engineer Martinez stood at his station, surrounded by dismantled equipment and what appeared to be 3 different coffee makers in various states of modification. "Pass me that phase converter," he called to his team. "And someone please tell the captain we're about to try something either brilliant or insane." Lieutenant Sarah Parker, his second in command, handed him the tool while monitoring the power readings. "Which one is it this time, Chief?" "Both," Martins grinned, connecting a power coupling to what used to be the ship's spare navigation array. "We're going to take these spare parts and make the Haelors question everything they know about physics." On the bridge, Reynolds received the engineering update with his usual calm. The Haelor Sunbreaker fleet had maintained their position, their crystal ships creating a constellation of power that would have made a lesser crew surrender on sight. "Sir," Foster called from her station, "they're broadcasting again. Multiple channels this time." Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Multiple channels? That's new. Let's hear them." The communications array came to life with a cacophony of Haelor voices. Unlike their previous unified transmissions, these were overlapping, contradicting, and most importantly, young. "The junior officers," Rodriguez explained, "they're talking among themselves. About us. About how we fight. Sir, they're playing our music." Indeed, through the command channel bleed, they could hear the distinct notes of classical rock music, specifically AC/DC's Back in Black, playing on several Haelor ships. "Martinez," Reynolds called down to engineering, "how's that brilliant insanity coming along?" The chief engineer's reply was punctuated by the sound of something electrical sparking. "Ready for the test run, Captain. We've converted our spare parts into what I'm calling uncertainty missiles. They don't actually explode. They just make the Haelor's sensors go completely haywire. Launch when ready," Reynolds ordered, then turned to Foster. "Get ready to record their reaction. This should be interesting." The first makeshift missile launched from the Prometheus, its trajectory erratic by design. The Haelor ship's perfect formation suddenly broke as their sensors failed to predict its path. The missile, made from spare communications equipment and parts from the ship's entertainment system, created a field of pure chaos in their carefully calculated combat space. "Their formation is breaking down," Foster reported, unable to hide her amazement. "The younger ships are moving independently, ignoring chain of command." Rodriguez added, "Sir, the chatter is increasing. They're asking questions about human innovation. Some are even discussing the concept of jury rigging. They're fascinated by our ability to make things work that shouldn't." Reynolds watched as another of Martinez's improvised devices launched, this one broadcasting every rock song in the ship's database while scrambling the Haelor's targeting systems. The effect on the enemy fleet was immediate and unprecedented. "Captain," Martins called up, his voice mixed with the sound of power tools and classic rock. "You should see the readings we're getting. The younger Haelor ships are actually trying to copy our modifications. They're learning." The bridge crew watched in amazement as several Haelor vessels began attempting to mirror the Prometheus's unconventional tactics. Their movements became less rigid, more fluid, almost human. "Sir," Foster said, her voice quiet with realization, "I don't think we're fighting a battle anymore. We're starting a revolution." Reynolds nodded, understanding the full implications. The Haelor Empire had built its power on perfect order, perfect obedience, and perfect predictability. But now their youth were getting their first taste of something else. Creative freedom. "Martinez," he called down to engineering, "how many more of those missiles can you make?" "With what I've got here." Martins laughed. "Give me an hour and every coffee filter on the ship, and I'll show the entire fleet what human engineering really looks like." As the space around them filled with the sounds of rock music and the sight of Haelor ships breaking formation to experiment with their own innovations, Reynolds realized they had achieved something far more significant than a military victory. They had introduced chaos to order, creativity to conformity, and the irresistible human spirit of innovation to a civilization that had never known such freedom. "Would you like me to continue with Part 6, or would you like any adjustments to Part 5? The alert klaxons on the bridge of the Prometheus suddenly changed their tone. Lieutenant Foster's hands flew over her console as she processed the new information. "Captain," she called out, "one of the Haelor support ships. Their shields just failed completely. They're venting atmosphere from their port section." Reynolds was on his feet before she finished speaking. "Life signs. Multiple casualties reported," Rodriguez added, monitoring the distress signals. "Their medical systems are overwhelmed." The captain's next words shocked everyone on the Haelor command channel. "This is Captain Reynolds of the Prometheus. We're detecting casualties on your support vessel. We have advanced medical facilities and are offering immediate assistance." The silence that followed was profound. Even the rock music that had been playing across the fleet went quiet. Admiral Vexthor's voice finally crackled through. "You offer aid to your enemy during combat. Explain this tactical decision." "It's not a tactical decision," Reynolds replied simply. "It's a human one. Dr. Anderson, prepare your medical bay. Martinez, get those emergency transporters working." In the medical bay, Dr. Mike Anderson was already converting the secondary recovery ward. "Tell the Haelors their crystal-based biology won't be an issue. We've handled worse during spring break on Mars Colony." The damaged Haelor ship hung in space, its crystal hull dulled from the system failure. Then something unprecedented happened. 3 young Haelor commanders broke formation to create a protective screen around their wounded comrades. "Sir," Rodriguez reported, her voice full of wonder, "the junior officers. They're requesting permission to learn our emergency response protocols." Reynolds smiled. "Send them everything we have." And Rodriguez, "Include the files on historical human disaster response. Show them who we really are." The next hour was unlike anything in either species' military history. Human medical teams worked alongside Haelor engineers, teaching them the art of emergency repairs with limited resources. Dr. Anderson found himself explaining the concept of triage to wide-eyed Haelor medical officers who had never considered prioritizing patients by anything other than rank. "Their medical technology is actually more advanced than ours," Anderson reported via comm. "They just never considered using it creatively. You should see their faces when I showed them how to convert a food synthesizer into an emergency blood purifier." Meanwhile, in engineering, Martinez had started what he called an emergency innovation workshop with several young Haelor engineers. They watched in fascination as he demonstrated how to bypass safety protocols without causing catastrophic failure. "It's like teaching kids how to color outside the lines," He commented to Reynolds. They're natural engineers once you get them past but that's not in the manual stage. On the bridge, Foster monitored the changing tactical situation. Sir, the Haelor fleet's formation. It's something new. They're adapting their crystal technology to match our shield harmonics. They're learning to improvise. Admiral Vexthor's next transmission carried an emotion never before heard in a Haelor command voice. Uncertainty. Captain Reynolds, your actions defy all combat logic. You risk your own safety to aid enemies, share military secrets with potential adversaries, and treat our junior officers as equals. How do you expect to achieve victory? Reynolds looked at his bridge crew, each member working seamlessly with their Haelor counterparts through shared displays. Admiral, sometimes the greatest victory isn't defeating your enemy. It's making them your friends. Now, would you like to learn how we make coffee? I think you'll find it pairs well with strategic planning. The response came not from the Admiral, but from dozens of young Haelor officers simultaneously. We would learn of this coffee and its powers. Foster couldn't hold back her laugh. Sir, I think we just won the war with caffeine and kindness. No, Lieutenant, Reynolds replied, watching as more Haelor ships began moving into cooperative rather than combat positions. We just showed them something their empire never could. That strength doesn't come from perfect order, but from our capacity to care, create, and change. Would you like me to continue with Part 7, or would you like any adjustments to Part 6? 300 years of Haelor military doctrine unraveled in the space of a single shift change. The former battle zone had transformed into something that defied every protocol in both human and Haelor space manuals. Captain, Rodriguez called from her station. You need to hear this. She patched the communication through the bridge speakers. Dozens of young Haelor voices filled the air, each one breaking centuries of communication protocol. They weren't just talking. They were joking, sharing ideas, and most shockingly, questioning orders. With all due respect, High Command, one young officer's voice rang clear. But have you tried their coffee? It makes our efficiency stims look like space dust. Reynolds couldn't help but smile as he watched the tactical display. The once perfect formation of the Haelor fleet had evolved into something new. A fluid, adaptive pattern that combined crystal technology with human unpredictability. Sir, Foster reported, 3 more ships have broken from standard combat protocol. They're requesting engineering schematics for our coffee makers. In engineering, Martinez was holding what he called an emergency innovation seminar with a group of fascinated Haelor engineers. Look, his voice crackled through the comm. The secret isn't just the coffee. It's about teaching them to think outside their crystal boxes. The bridge crew watched as the revolution spread through the fleet like wildfire. Young officers were sharing Earth music between ships, experimenting with non-standard flight patterns, and most importantly, beginning to question the rigid hierarchy that had defined their lives. Captain Reynolds, Admiral Vexthor's voice cut through the chatter, carrying an edge of desperation. What have you done to my fleet? Nothing, Admiral, Reynolds replied calmly, taking a sip from his coffee. We just showed them there's more than one way to navigate the stars. The evidence was clear on every scanner. Haelor ships were moving in ways their designers had never intended, their crystal arrays pulsing with new patterns as young crews experimented with human-inspired modifications. Sir, Rodriguez interrupted, her eyes wide. The junior officers, they're starting to share jokes, human jokes, over official channels. A young Haelor voice crackled through. How many high commanders does it take to change a crystal array? None. They'd rather keep flying in the dark than break formation. The laughter that followed was perhaps the most revolutionary sound ever heard in Haelor space. Martinez, Reynolds called down to engineering. Status report on our new friends. They're like kids in a candy store, Captain, the chief engineer replied. One of them just figured out how to boost their shield output by 30% using nothing but spare parts and what he calls human intuition. Their senior engineers are having fits. The revolution wasn't just technical. Through the view screens, the crew could see Haelor ships breaking formation to try new configurations, their movements becoming more fluid, more human. "Sir," Foster said quietly, "High Command just issued a direct order for all ships to resume standard formation." 3/4 of the fleet just responded with Earth music. The opening riffs of "We Will Rock You" thundered through space as ship after ship joined the impromptu concert of defiance. Admiral Vexthor's final transmission was short. "High Command, we have a situation beyond control protocols. The human infection of independence has spread too far. Requesting emergency recall of all fleet units." But his own fleet had other ideas. Captain Reynolds, a chorus of young Haelor voices broadcast together. "We request additional training in human innovation techniques and more coffee." Reynolds stood at his command station, surveying the scene of joyful chaos before him. The mighty Haelor Empire, with all its crystal technology and perfect order, had finally met its match, not in superior firepower or advanced technology, but in the simple human traits of creativity, humor, and the unquenchable desire for a really good cup of coffee. "Well, ladies and gentlemen," he addressed his crew, "I believe we just won a war without firing a shot. Martinez, better start another pot of coffee. It looks like we're going to be having a lot more company. Would you like me to continue with the final part 8, or would you like any adjustments to part 7? 1 month later, the bridge of the Prometheus had become something its designers never could have imagined. Reynolds sat in his command chair, surrounded by both his regular crew and a rotating contingent of young Haelor officers, all eagerly learning the art of human innovation. "Captain's log," Reynolds spoke as he sipped his morning coffee. "The Haelor Empire's official history now marks the Coffee Revolution as the beginning of their new era. Though I still think they're missing the point about the coffee being a symbol rather than the actual source of our power." Lieutenant Foster, now running training sessions for both human and Haelor tactical officers, looked up from her station. "Sir, you'll want to see this. The latest dispatch from the Empire's military academy." The screen displayed a sight that would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. Young Haelor cadets were being taught human adaptive thinking as a core subject. The course material included everything from Earth's military history to basic engineering improvisation, with a special focus on the Prometheus incident. "They're using your coffee maker modification as a standard test case," Rodriguez called out, unable to hide her amusement. "Though they're still struggling to understand how you came up with the idea in the first place." Martinez's voice crackled through the comm. "Tell them it's simple. Sleep deprivation and caffeine are the parents of innovation." Speaking of which, the Haelor engineers just successfully completed their first independent jury rig project. They converted their crystal matrix analyzer into a universal coffee brewer. Reynolds shook his head, smiling. "How'd they manage that?" They said, and I quote, "We stopped thinking like Haelors and started thinking like sleep-deprived humans. I've never been more proud." The tactical display showed the changes spreading through Haelor space. Their once rigid ship formations had evolved into fluid, adaptive patterns. Crystal technology, previously bound by tradition, was being reinvented daily as young officers experimented with human-inspired modifications. "Sir," Foster reported, "the Empire just released their official analysis of the Prometheus encounter. They're calling it the greatest military revolution since the formation of the Empire. Though they're still trying to explain how a single human ship armed with coffee and creativity changed 3 centuries of military doctrine." Rodriguez added, "The best part, they've made your quote about sometimes the greatest victory is making friends required reading for all command students. A message flashed across the main screen. A personal communication from Admiral Vexfor, who had become an unexpected ally in the Empire's transformation. Captain Reynolds, the Admiral's message read, "Our young officers have started a new tradition. Every major decision must now be discussed over what they call a coffee summit. While our high command struggles with this informal approach, I must admit, the quality of our strategic planning has improved significantly. Perhaps there is something to this human practice of combining caffeine and creativity." Reynolds stood, walking to the viewport to watch a group of Haelor ships practicing new, unpredictable maneuvers. Their crystal hulls caught the starlight in ways that seemed more artistic than military. "You know," he said to his crew, "when we set out to explore space, we never expected to change an empire with nothing more than a coffee maker and a willingness to think differently." Speaking of coffee makers, Martins chimed in. The Haelor Engineering Corps just submitted their first patent, a crystal-enhanced coffee brewing system. They're calling it the Reynolds method. Apparently, it makes the perfect cup every time. The bridge crew laughed, but there was pride in their laughter. They had done more than win a battle or survive an encounter. They had shown an ancient empire that true strength lies not in perfect order, but in the ability to adapt, create, and most importantly, to share a cup of coffee with former enemies. "Well," Reynolds said, raising his coffee mug in a toast, "here's to the future. May it be as unpredictable as humans, and as bright as Haelor crystals." And somewhere in the vast archives of the Haelor Empire, a new entry was added to their historical records. Never underestimate a human ship, especially one that runs on coffee and creativity. The end. Would you like any adjustments to the final part, or shall we consider the story complete?